I'm pleased now to welcome to the program Lee Hartley Carter. She's a Republican strategist. She's also the president of Maslansky Partners, which is a language strategy firm. Hello to you, and thanks for speaking to us.
Happy to be here.
Look, this is an enormous win today for Donald Trump, better than the polling had predicted, even though Donald Trump is the first US president to be convicted of a felon, several felons. There is something clearly then about his messaging, his language, that cuts through with people. How do you explain that?
So there's a few things. Number one, his plan for America has been very clear right from the beginning. He's talked about making America great again, and he's been very clear about what those policies are that he's going to do for the American people, whether people like them or not. He's talked about being tough on immigration. He's talked about growing the economy. He's talked about all of the same things for a very long time. And I think that has been incredibly effective. He's also spoken to the American people about what the American people are most concerned about. When you look at the exit polling, when you look at the polling of what people voted on, they voted on number one, the economy and inflation. And this is truly a global issue. We've seen this happen across the world. People are frustrated with how much they have to pay for groceries, for gas, for those sorts of things. In the United States, immigration is a very, very big concern, not just because of the open borders, but because of the strain on resources we're seeing in the country. And so that was the number two issue. And then after that, people were concerned about the issues that were top of mind for Kamala Harris, which were abortion and the threat to democracy. But I think people put at top of the ticket was number one, inflation in the economy, and number two, immigration.
All right, well, let's talk about tangibly what you think Trump will do when he is in office next year, because he has made claims, for example, about the largest deportation of immigrants in American history. That is something we expect may well be challenged in the courts. What do you think, in a practical sense, we will see from Trump, let's say, in those first 100 days?
You know, I think there's a lot of talk about executive orders that he's already put in place that are going to be about immigration. Is it going to be a mass deportation? I'm not sure. I think Donald Trump has often used sweeping symbolic gestures as a way of getting his policy point across. I'm not sure that that's what he's going to mean, but I certainly think that he's going to tighten the border. I think he's going to talk about making regulations simplified in certain areas. He's definitely talking about allowing fracking, getting back to fossil fuel distribution and other things that have been tightened up. I think it's going to be loosening regulations here in the United States. And then, you know, we're going to see what the mandate is across the House and the Senate. Right now, it's clear that the Republicans have taken the Senate. We're not sure yet what's going to happen with the House. It looks like the House might be won by 1 to 3 points, which doesn't mean it's going to be easy for him to get legislation passed, because that's a tight margin. But if he does have the House, the Senate, and the White House, I think it's going to be a lot easier for him to get some of these legislations passed that he's been talking about.
All right. Your thoughts then on the kinds of people Trump will appoint to top jobs now, because last time around he had relatively mainstream figures with him, the likes of John Kelly, James Mattis. And look, not this time. John Kelly, for example, who was his chief of staff, has said recently that Donald Trump meets the criteria of a fascist. So clearly he won't be working with Trump. I wonder who you think then is going to be running this country alongside him.
You know, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see who he chooses. It's very clear that he's got a great partnership right now with Elon Musk, and I'm sure we're going to see him in some shape or form in the administration. I think it's very clear that he's got a very big role for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and we're going to see what that means. It's very clear that he's putting him in the healthcare space, not necessarily with climate and other things. But it seems to me that he's got a diverse group of people that he's talking to. Many of them, I think, are going to be coming from the business world. I don't think we're going to see all of the same characters that he had assembled before. Obviously, he's had a lot of falling outs with those folks. But he seems to have a coalition of people that are I think more from the private sector. They're going to see people coming back from government offices.
Right. Well, let's just talk about one of those specific individuals you mentioned there, Robert Kennedy Jr. You mentioned he may well be put in charge of some kind of health mandate. This is an individual who doesn't believe in vaccines. Does that concern you as somebody who may have a major health portfolio?
Well, I think the American people have said that they're concerned. But one of the things that's been really interesting that's happened in the United States is that there's been a lot of questioning about what's happening in the American healthcare system. And it's not just about Robert Kennedy as much as it is people have now questioned, can the government tell us what we must do with vaccines? There's also a lot of questions about the foods that we eat. You in Europe have so many different allowances on what you're allowed to put in your food. We don't have those same things in the United States. So we have a lot more chemicals in our foods. And I think Robert Kennedy talks about that, and that's something that's pretty popular. There are a lot of people, I think, who have very, very valid and real concerns about his comments on pharma, about his comments on vaccines. Are they right? Are they? And I think it is a legitimate and valid concern. But there are some things that he's talking about that are very, very popular. Questioning the role of big pharma, questioning the kinds of things that are in our foods. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, but I think it certainly will be controversial.
Look, just a final question for you then. Woman to woman, if I may. I want to ask you about the sexist language that Donald Trump has used during this campaign, directed obviously at Kamala Harris, also at Nancy Pelosi. It was just this week that he described her as evil, sick and crazy. He then used a sexist slur that I won't repeat. But look, you are a language strategist. You work in language. I wonder what you make of it. Does it concern you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that the rhetoric of Donald Trump has been something that is concerning to all Americans. But what ended up happening, I think, for a lot of American people is they were willing to say, I will overlook some of the rhetoric. I will overlook some of the language in favor of some of the policies. And, you know, this was a policy, not a character vote. And I absolutely am concerned. I'm a mother of a 5-year-old little girl who I don't want to learn that that's the way that we speak to women or speak about women. But at the same time, I want my daughter to have a hope in the future. I want the economy to be strong. So as you know, I think women made a lot of very, very difficult decisions. And I talked to voters throughout this election cycle who said, look, I like on the one hand some of his policies on the economy. I can't stand some of the things that he says or some of his characteristics, whether you talk about the language that he's used, you talk about the indictments and all of the things that he has against him. But at the end of the day, people made this decision, and as Americans, we're going to have to live with it now. And I think it was a tough choice for a lot of people to make.
The Republican strategist, Lee Hartley Carter, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.